Hey y'all, how you doing today? It's been a while since I been in front of the camera. Had a lot going on, but figured I'll go ahead and pick up where I left off with Dad's fall and everything. So, I think the last time I talked to y'all, I got y'all up to where he was in Avanti of Roanoke and the way they neglected him. One thing I didn't mention throughout all this time, um, as I have said before, everything that went on was Daddy's choices, not mine. And unfortunately, my ex, Tim, didn't really understand that. And every decision that was made, every action or, unaction, basically, he was constantly criticizing everything I did instead of being the support that I needed. He made the situation 1,000 times worse. I mean, even 10,000. I swear there's no number I could put on how much he made it worse. Because, like I said, he was continuously questioning everything that was going on and telling me that I should be doing things differently and that everything I was doing was wrong because it wasn't the way he would be doing it. And that really contributed to me not wanting to go home, not wanting to speak with him on the phone or text him or anything, because my stress levels were through the roof as it was. And he just made things so much worse that I didn't want to deal with him. So I kept my contact with him to the bare minimum, basically. Now, after I told Avante of Roanoke to cut Dad's life support and, let the chips fall where they may, they finally did start trying to wean him off the ventilator. Throughout his stay there, they would do arterial blood gases, which is where they go into the artery at your wrist to check your carbon dioxide levels. And they had done their testing and his CO2 levels were fine, but they claimed that there was something else that came up as abnormal on the other blood work they did. So they ended up sending him to Roanoke Memorial. When he got to Roanoke Memorial, the doctors there asked why he was on a ventilator. And of course, we told them, the history and what had been going on. And they were like, there's no reason you need to be on it. And they took him off the ventilator right then and there. And guess what? He didn't die. And he didn't need it at nighttime either, like the idiot doctor at Avante said he would. He had no issues whatsoever. So from that point on, the trach was still there, but, we had to slowly work to get it closed off and then get it removed so it could heal over. After Daddy left Roanoke Memorial, because he was off the ventilator, we got a spot at Salem Health and Rehab that is across from the Veterans Hospital in Salem. And sorry, my throat's scratchy. I had an endoscopy yesterday and it's made my throat really scratchy. When I went into Salem Health and Rehab for the first time, I walked in on residents roaming in the halls, going from room to room and singing. You don't find singing in a place like Avante, but Salem Health and Rehab, it was night and day difference between there and Avante. And, we the first night Daddy got there was rough. And I mean, rough enough to the point where I felt like we had been lied to and that we would have to find someplace else, because after he got there, they didn't have all his medications, so they couldn't give it to him. His Daddy's ventilator was gone, but he still was having issues coughing up phlegm and everything, and there would be mucus plugs that would get into his trach, and nobody on staff at Salem knew how to deal with that issue, because they don't deal with ventilator patients, but they have had trach patients, but not in a long time. So their staff was not accustomed to dealing with the issues that were coming up with Dad. So, on top of him not having his medicines for just under 24 hours, he ended up with a mucus plug at the trach, and nobody knew how to get it removed and get his breathing better and get his oxygen levels better. And I mean, I was calling the administrator, I was calling the assistant administrator, feeling like we had totally been lied to, and that this place was no better than Avante. And I was ready to call an ambulance to take Dad to Lewis Gale and get him out of there. But they had a lady that was off duty at the time that knew how to deal with the issues, so they had called her in and got her in there. And they were able to get him cleared up enough and get the mucus out, and everything pretty well chilled out. But by that time, it was already like 6 o'clock in the morning. You know, he had gotten no sleep. I had gotten no sleep. I was irate at the time. So the administrator assured me that that kind of situation would never happen again, that they were going to immediately take the staff and teach them what they would need to know in case that situation came up again. The room Dad was in was a dual occupancy room, but there was no one in the second bed, and they let me stay in that bed with Dad and made sure to keep it open. That way I didn't have to worry about, traveling back and forth home, that I could stay with him 24/7. And they fed me 3 meals a day at no charge. Once they got the meds in for Dad, he was able to get some rest, and so was I. But I'll tell you, after the initial problems, there were no more. It was amazing, the care that they gave to Dad and the accommodating and help they gave me as well. They had gotten the proper mattress for Dad. They were absolutely diligent about repositioning him every 2 hours. And they actually got well enough at it to where they could come in and readjust him in the night without even waking him. When they would give him, his baths, clean up from, his bodily functions, changing the bed sheets, all of that, they were absolutely so careful that I could actually take this step back to just be present and not have to be involved in it. And after, I think after just about 3 or 4 days of being in there, Daddy told me that for the first time since his accident, he felt safe. And that, among anything, made the situation better, knowing that he felt safer without me, him feeling safe when I wasn't there was what he was talking about. He wasn't, when I would have to leave, he wasn't afraid of what was going to be done or not done. And that's a big testament to how good Salem Health and Rehab was. After he got in there, they were, excuse me, they did physical and occupational therapy every day, which at the other place it was only twice a week at most. They also were doing speech therapy and working to make sure he didn't aspirate anything when he was eating and drinking. And I mean, they were on top of everything. It wasn't long after being there, I guess maybe a week, that, yeah, it might have been 2 weeks. I can't remember, but you know, they got him off the trach. They would take it out for times. Not take it out, but use the cap so he could speak well without it coming through the trach. And then when they were pretty sure that it would heal better, they took it out, and within like a week of them taking it out, it was healed over with no issues. And Daddy was very happy to have that out. And of course, yeah, after that, they started really working on not using the feeding tube all the time. They started him on a soft diet, well, a pureed diet, I should say. Of course, Daddy couldn't feed himself, so, you know, the nurses offered to do it, but I took care of that myself. What they would send, I would feed Daddy. And at first it was just pureed food, and then he graduated to soft foods, and then, you know, by the time our time up there was done, he was eating almost totally regular food. You know, we'd have to make sure we had it in small enough pieces that it wouldn't, you know, cause any issues, but it was just back to normal food. And, you know, they were getting him up into the specialized chair and getting him outside, which I tell you, that first time he went outside, he was ecstatic. You know, just feeling the sun on his face like that was just so helpful to not only him physically, but mentally, being able to feel like a normal human again. You know, his upper arm movements and strength were continuously getting better. You know, he still really couldn't use his hands that much, but they were really working on it. Now, that's not to say everything went perfect. I mean, he did, you know, because of the catheter, he did end up getting another urinary tract infection, which, I caught the signs of it early and let them know, and they were able to start him on antibiotics, quick enough that it didn't get real bad. Um, in this kind of instance, of course, there's going to be setbacks, but the major setback we had was the fact that because of the neglect from Avante, he ended up with a pressure wound right at his backside, at the base of the spine, just above the crack in his buttocks. So we had to start fighting that. You know, it was a bad one. Of Salem, knew that they couldn't handle it on their own, so they had gotten him in to see wound care management at Lewis Gale, and they ended up having to open it and debride it and get rid of all the dead skin tissue in it, because it was starting to fester. And in someone that's paralyzed, when they can feel, that type of injury is never good, because he could feel the pain from that pressure wound. So, we started the intense treatment that it needed. 3 times a day. It had to be, the covering removed from it. They had to take the packing out of it, flush it out, repack it with gauze and such, and then cover it back over. But at its worst, the wound was so deep that you could see his spine when they had to get away all the dead tissue. So it was deep, and it was big enough for me to get my fist in. And I don't have tiny hands. They're not real big, but I could fit my fist in it. That's how big it was. And it's all because of Avante of Roanoke neglecting him. Now, during his stay at the skilled nursing facility in Lynchburg, he ended up getting diagnosed with a blood clot in his brachial artery on his right side. So they had put him on a blood thinner. And because of limited movement, they kept him on it. So, when he would go to the wound care facility, it was, he always bled a lot from it because of the blood thinners. But, of course, they were very careful and made sure things were as safe as they could be. Now, even though we were in Salem, I still stayed every night with Dad. I did not want to go home. You know, as good as they were there, I still felt better staying. And because of the treatment of my husband, I didn't want to go home. So I just continued to stay with Dad. And Salem Health and Rehab were totally fine with that. But it was also nice that I could be there and take a step back and let them do their work, and knowing that they were doing their work and not hurting Daddy. Oh, that was a big weight off my mind. Now, I've talked before in a previous video about the fact that I used to use a lot of coping mechanisms to avoid dealing with the world and what the issues that I would be going through. And after we got to Salem, I found an online game that I could play on my tablet. Whenever I wasn't doing schoolwork or, doing whatever I could to help Dad. Reality during that time sucked. It sucked bad. So the online game was my escape from everything. And while I was on there, of course I made a lot of friends. But I also ended up getting to know one person a lot more in depth. He was kind and caring and compassionate. And instead of hearing what a horrible job I've been doing, like I was from my husband, he knew what I was going through, and he did support me. He told me I was doing an excellent job because I would talk to him daily about everything going on. And of course, it wasn't right. But at the time, I needed some support from someone, anyone. And even though it was only online, I latched onto it fiercely. Now, during our time at Salem, after the wound had been debrided several times, because of that wound, his physical therapy was not as intense as it needed to be to get him stronger at a faster pace. Things were really slow because the wound would cause Dad a lot of pain. it was just really hurting everything that we needed to get accomplished. So we, after consulting with the facility and knowing what needed to be done, we made the decision to take the time and bring Dad home and let the wound heal. And then afterwards, we would go back to Salem Health and Rehab to let them, continue the physical and occupational therapy. When I had made the, statement at Avante of them taking him off the life support, their bureaucratic crap said they couldn't do it, but we could do it at home. So at that point, I had already set up to have the house inspected to make sure, everything was wide, the doors were wide enough for his chair, that we would, that the floor was sturdy enough to hold a medical bed and the equipment, and, that the electrical outlets could hold the equipment without malfunctioning. I mean, I had already taken care of all that. So when we made the decision to leave Salem Health and Rehab, the house was already ready for everything to be set up, and all I had to do was contact the places I needed to get everything set. We were able to rent a medical bed frame, but we did have to buy the mattress. It was a very, very specialized mattress that constantly adjusted areas on it to keep pressure from staying in one point. The place we got all the medical equipment from, because he was going home, and even though I had planned on having home health come in 2 to 3 times a day, his care was going to be on me. So they had me come in so they could, quote unquote, teach me how to, properly use the feeding tube to give him medicines, because that's all it was being used for at that time. Was he would be given extra nutrition at night through the feeding tube, and he would be given his medicines. Other than that, he was eating meals, 3 times a day on his own. So, they had to make sure that I knew what I was doing when it came to using the peg tube. So I go up there, and they start going through everything, and then they of course show me how to do things properly, which by that time I was a pro anyway. And when they asked me to do the demonstration, I did it even better than the instructor did. And he kind of laughed and said, "Okay, well, you're just fine. You can go now, because you can do it better than most people I've ever seen before." So that was pretty amusing. During the entire ordeal, I would keep my mouth shut and my eyes open. And if I wasn't sure about something, I would definitely ask questions then. But, I knew how to take care of Dad. The only thing is, I knew I couldn't move him on my own to be able to change bed sheets and to be able to, clean him up from his, you know, bodily functions, which is why I had home health come in. I had set it up for 3 times a day. At the time, right after we got home, we were still working on finding a third person to come in. So, by the time we made it home, it wasn't perfect, but things were running smoothly enough. So, this part of the story is going to be for another time. It's, my video is pretty long as it is. So, from the time Dad got home will be a tale for the next couple days. Not sure whether it'll be tomorrow or Friday or Thursday or Friday, but I definitely will recount that later. So, my one big thing through this video that I hope you understand is, not every facility in the healthcare or industry is equal. Salem Health and Rehab was absolutely the best we ever had to be in. They did go above and beyond, not just with Dad, but with me, and making sure that I was healthy as well, and that I would get rest and be fed. And if you're in this area and you need some sort a facility for whatever reason, that place is amazing. Well, I can honestly say it was amazing 7 years ago. I don't know what it's like now. But then it really was absolutely amazing care. And the people cared so much. So, if you're in the area I'm in, which is Southwestern Virginia, and you have to put somebody in any kind of nursing facility, they are definitely at the top of the list, in my opinion. But I am going to bid a fond farewell for now. I hope you all have a wonderful evening. If you've watched this, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I send all my love out to y'all. So have a good night, and I'll talk to you all later. Bye.